UFOs Taking Water by Charles Lear. UFOs are often reported to have left behind evidence of their visits in the form of physical traces, but there are also reports of them taking something away, and often it is water, from tanks, pools, rivers, lakes, and oceans. There are enough of these sorts of reports that Linda Zimmerman and Michael Warden were able to devote an entire episode, From the Vault, Everybody in the Pool, of UFO Headquarters to the subject. Zimmerman began the episode with stories told to her by witnesses in the Hudson Valley of instances where water was missing from pools after UFO sightings in the area, and estimated that there were at least 5 such occurrences in the region from 1975 into the early 1980s. Far from being isolated to the Hudson Valley, such reports come from all over the world, and Zimmerman and Warden present several. In this week's blog, we'll look at some we've come across in our research. In the April 1976 APRO Bulletin, there is an article headlined, Water Pumping UFOs. It details 4 reports, 3 of which come from Mr. Junichi Takanashi, APRO's man in Japan. Most of the focus is on a case from Hokkaido. Takanashi reported that an incident took place there in July 1974 that was witnessed by a sophomore at a university in the Kanto district. The witness is identified by the pseudonym Masaki Kudo, and is said to have been working a summer job as a night watchman at a Hokkaido lumberyard. According to the article, while he was sitting in his car on a break having a cigarette, Kudo spotted a light that came down to within 20 meters above the water, and what appeared to be a glass-like transparent tube came out of the bottom of it and touched the water's surface. It glowed at the contact point and seemed to be sucking up water. As it did so, it is said to have made a sound that Kudo described as sounding like a cicada. Kudo reported that the light came towards him, and that it was changed in color from orange to white and lit up the area like daylight. He could make out that it was an object, and reported that he saw windows and figures in them that were too small and deformed to be called the shadows of men. He said he noticed 4 or 5 other objects that were white and round. The original object then sucked the other objects into it and moved off to the north at great speed. Kudo reported feeling numbness in his whole body, just as after we sit for a long time for a yogi practice and having a headache. He said there were meaningless sounds coming from the radio. According to the article, Takanashi cited 2 similar instances, one from the May-June 1969 Canadian UFO report, presumably from Canada, and one from the July-August 1972 Flying Saucer Review that was reported from Germany. Also mentioned is an incident from Oregon, reported in a letter sent to APRO. All 3 are said to have involved a UFO sucking up water through a tube. Wharton mentions an incident that reportedly occurred in Australia that got some attention at the time, and the case has apparently continued to intrigue people, as there is an April 24, 2023 posting on YouTube by Ben Hurl, who provides a video tour of the area where the incident is said to have occurred. The case was investigated by the Victorian UFO Research Society, and there is an account written by Pat Gilday headlined The White Acres Encounter, also known as the Rosedale Water Tank Incident, published in the June 1981 issue of that organization's publication, the Australian Annual Flying Saucer Review. The location of the reported incident is given as White Acres, a cattle grazing area 9 miles west of Sale, Victoria, on the Princes Highway. The date is given as October 15, 1980, and the time is between 1 and 1:50 a.m. The witness is identified as property station hand George Blackwell. According to the account, Blackwell woke up around 1 a.m. to the sounds of a panicked horse running around in its paddock, bellowing cattle, and an unusual whistling sound. He went outside to investigate and saw an object 550 feet away flying in low from the southwest. He estimated it was 6 feet off the ground. It's described as having emitted a low whistling sound and orange and blue lights. Blackwell thought it was an airplane crashing, but as it got closer, he saw that it was dome-shaped and not like any plane he'd ever seen. He estimated its size as 10 feet high and 26 feet long. He is said to have watched it as it landed a quarter mile from the house, 50 feet away from a concrete water tank. According to the account, Blackwell went back into the house to change clothes, and then got on a motorcycle to ride out and see the object up close. He stopped to open a gate while keeping an eye on the object. It was still making the whistling noise, and there were slowly revolving orange and blue lights. It was stationary on the ground, and in the moonlight he could see it was bell-shaped, with a white dome on top. After about 10 minutes, the object lifted up, and Blackwell got back on his motorcycle and rode towards it. The whistling noise is described as increasing in pitch and to an ear-piercing intensity, like a jet engine in reverse, and the object is said to have given off a blast of heat as it slowly rose up. Blackwell is described as having been on a slope which put the headlight of the motorcycle in a position to light up the bottom of the object. He is said to have seen what looked like the rim of a hovercraft, which receded in width as the object rose up. Then there is this description. Suddenly the suction reduced in the liftoff, as did the high-pitched noise, and stones and cow pads fell from below the craft. The object is reported to have flown off to the southeast. In the section subheaded, "The Results of the Investigation," Blackwell is said to have developed a headache the next day, which is described as not a normal thing for the witness. According to the account, the investigators saw physical evidence in the form of a circular brown ring, 14 inches wide around the circumference, with a diameter of approximately 30 feet, with 6 evenly spaced half-spokes pointing inwards towards the center. It is said that cattle would not go near it. It is also reported that there was a distinct line of rocks and cow pads lying on the ground in an easterly line from the circle. And, in keeping with the theme of this blog, there is this. The 10,000-gallon water tank was nearly empty to the amazement of the witness and the owner. No explanation could be found for this. An article right after this, headlined UFOs Visited a Third Farm, describes a similar case from 2 months before, where the owner of a property in Bundalagua discovered several perfect circles of burnt-off grass within a 20-meter radius of his huge natural billabong. He reported that he noticed that the water level of the billabong, a stagnant pool branching off a river and fed during floods, was unusually low. He said that as there were no cattle in the paddock at the time, their reaction to the circles could not be gauged. Another case from Australia turns up in the February 1995 issue of UFO Afra News, edited by the principal investigator of the aerial school incident in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, Cynthia Hind. Notably, this is the issue where that case is described. Under the headline, Water, Its Significance to UFOs, there is this description of an incident said to have occurred on June 29, 1979, sent to Hind by Paul Norman of VUFORS. Ron and Heather Moses checked their 13,000-gallon, 52,000-liter tank late on Saturday. It was full to within 2 inches of the top. The next day, it was bone dry. The plug was still in place. There was no sign of leakage and no tracks to suggest anyone had been near the tank. 2 days later, reports of flashing lights brought scores of reporters and UFO spotters to the area. According to the account, Heather said there were reports of blue flashing lights going over their paddock. Speculating on what happened to the water, Heather said, "The only explanation I can think of is that a UFO took it." Charles Lear is the author of Crashed Saucers and Malevolent Aliens, available at Amazon.com.